We did get to work with Australian SAS guys. We go out and we get to the terrorist training camp. We're watching as nothing is happening. And then Spectre gunship, 40 millimeter. And then you see the trucks roll in. Brah, brah, brah. They're gone. The SAS blew the guys away. One of the guys, he kind of bounced up to the wall, partially melted into the wall. The whole thing that they're in, there's nothing flammable. It's mud huts. So Saddam, when Delta actually gets him, I ended up actually getting to see him. And so he's sitting there. The look on his face is just a permanent disdain for him even needing to be here because we're so below him. They're having these kids get on bicycles and ride toward the Americans. And they said, be on the lookout. The one on the back has an RPG. So I'm literally seeing that. There's two kids with a bicycle, and I'm looking at them through my ACOG. The one kid comes around the corner, and he has something in his hands, and I'm looking at this kid, slow, steady squeeze. My name is Seth Ryan. I was in both the Marine Corps and the Army. I was rank in the Marine Corps, Lance Corporal E3, and then I re-enlisted for the Ranger Regiment and served until, I did 3 years there, so a total of almost 6, and I got out as a corporal. And I served from joined in 2000 and Marine Corps boot camp January of 2000, and then I ended up getting out April of 2005. So my upbringing, my childhood was a very interesting one. I would say I was shielded from quite a bit of the chaos by my parents, luckily, because my mom was like the good kid of her family and my dad was kind of the good kid of his family. But the rest of the extended family and my mom's family that I was raised around, primarily, a lot of drugs and alcohol. I got to see a lot of my aunts and uncles just laying on the couch asleep for days after being up for days, and then they're in jail. Now they're in prison. Now they're getting out of jail. Now they're going back to prison. And so I was just around a lot of bad influences. And I would just say, all in all, my childhood was a good childhood, even though, as I might share a couple stories, you're going to shake your head at that. All in all, especially once you've lived as long as I have and have talked to enough people, you realize there's a lot worse things out there than, maybe when you were like five years old was the first real memory that sticks with me. And I can remember coming home from church and we drove an hour. So as we're driving over the hills, we see this big light in the distance. And it gets closer, we get closer to it. And we come over the final hill, and sure enough, my mom's crying. And it's everything we own is on fire. The whole trailer. We lived in a mobile home on some land out in the sticks in Oklahoma. And I can remember my mom just, crying and bawling her eyes out. And I was so upset at 5 that my mom was crying, but I didn't really get it. And then I thought, oh, that's right. We have our pet. We have a pet raccoon. I've been raised with a pet raccoon. My raccoon might be dead in that fire. That's why my mom is crying. And sure enough, we get to the house, call the fire department, which was all volunteer firefighters. They show up with a water truck. And it's at that point that we learn they forgot to put water in the truck. So at that moment, it changed my entire life. Because from that moment on at 5, I decided I was going to be a firefighter. And when I grew up, I was going to always remember to put water in the truck. As silly as that is, as a 5-year-old, but that stuck with me like my whole life until September 11th. I was always going to be a firefighter, and then that's what really kind of changed that trajectory for me. But that was always stuck. My whole life, I'm going to be a firefighter. And so that was my goal. And for me, a huge part of that was just graduating high school. My family tree, we didn't have high school graduates. Nobody that I was raised around. The only family member that it turns out did graduate high school committed suicide a couple years later. So I never even knew her. She had passed away before I was ever born. But she was the only one that had actually graduated high school. So I think that made a very big impact on my entire childhood, because I'm around people that are looking for ways to get food stamps, some way to get on disability, some way to be able to just have money suck off the system and do drugs and just stay zonked out on the couch, asleep or up for days and on benders. So as like I just said, my childhood was a good one, because the irony is we were a member of a church, and when everybody found out how we'd lost everything, we actually now got to live in a house. We were living in a crappy trailer. Now we're in a house that this realtor has. It's a renter's. And so he let us live there for free. And then everybody donated money, and everybody donated hand-me-down clothes. So I had more toys, more clothes, a better house, and more money by losing everything. So that, I think, is one of the reasons why when people talk about, religion and going to church, and you don't need to do this or you don't need to do that, and I don't need to be a part of a church. I understand why they're saying that, and a lot of people have had really bad experiences. The other side of that, though, is there's no failing, because there's an entire community there to help you. And so I think I carried that through my military service. I've carried that through all of the different jobs I've had. I've known that there's always a net of people that care out there, and I'm not the type that would ever take that lightly or take it for granted. So I don't know. I think that has always mentally helped me, where there is no such thing as failure. Even if I don't pass whatever it is I'm about to go through, I'll just redo it until I do pass. And if worst case scenario, I get dropped and kicked out, I'm still going to end up in a better place than I was before. And if you come from nothing and you have no money, and that's how you're raised, like, it's only up from here, So joining the military for me was something I had never even considered in high school, because my dad had joined the Navy, and then he got on his motorcycle and rode off the ship and never came back. So that was the extent of the only military service we had in our family. He quit. He just rode away, and they never looked for him, because it was during the Carter administration. And so they were trying to get people to quit, and they're trying to kick people out and all of that back then. So he just rode off and never came back. So my whole childhood, anytime the military was brought up, it was just negative. Everything was negative. You're owned. You're just a piece of government property. If you go get a suntan and you get a burn, now you're going to get NJP'd because you destroyed government property. And it's literally written up that way. And so he was always talking of only the negatives. Well, come to find out, once I got older, that's because he was going in to be an electrician, and he signed up, went to boot camp, and then in his tech school afterwards, they found out a couple of shades of red and green looked the same to him, and then they made him a bosun's mate. So he was scraping paint off the side of the ship for the rest of his enlistment. So they weren't keeping up their end of their bargain to him, and so he just left, and that seemed to solve his problem. So that was my background. From there, playing football in high school, I had a coach who just asked me what I was going to do when I graduated. And I told him I'm going to be a firefighter, so I'm just going to be working on that. And he's like, it's not what I would have figured, which took me kind of aback, because this was the defensive coach, and he knew how hard I went in football. I was terrible at it. I was way too small. And I wasn't skilled, but I would take a hit like nobody else, and I was always bleeding at the end of every practice. And I loved it. It was fun for me. And he just said, I asked him, what did you think I was going to do? And he was like, I just figured you'd do something crazy, like join the Marines or something. And I was like, I thought firefighting would be pretty cool. He's like, oh, it's cool. It's not crazy. A lot of people are firefighters. Not very many people, are Marines. And of course, his brother's a Marine, and his family has a lot of Marines in it. And but that was the seed that he planted in my head. And so from there, now I'm working construction full time during the day, and I'm taking night classes at a junior college, and I'm miserable. And I've graduated high school, so new bar for the family tree, yay. But I look around and I don't want to be, that's not my bar. That's not where I want to hang my hat, is on that bar. I want to look toward what can I accomplish. And I see 3 Marines walking through the mall, and they're wearing their Marine Corps shirts, and they're jacked, and they're hanging out and having fun. And I just thought, why in the world would I not want to go do that? And the more I thought about it, the more you didn't have Google back then. You could just ask questions of people that you knew that had served, and do things by looking up actual books in the library. I did a little bit of research. I reached out. I had to go hunt down a recruiter, and I recruited myself for him. My mom cried. She didn't want me to join. My dad told me I was an idiot. Neither of them thought I was going to pass at all anyways. And, their fear was, my mom was, you're going to die. People die in Marine Corps boot camp. And they do. But that wasn't going to be me. And I have a net. There's always going to be people that are going to help me because I'm a part of the same community for them. So I went ahead and joined, but my thing was, because there was no war and there was never going to be a war, right? That was your mentality in the 1990s. We had taken out, 1991 Desert Storm. I remember as a 9-year-old, I believe I was like 9, and it was 72 hours to take over Iraq. And I was like, well, we don't really have any enemies left. And that was how smart I was back then. And that's kind of the upbringing that I had. Yeah, our military is so crazy. And the Marines are so crazy. All these people are so crazy. Nobody could touch us. And so I decided to join, but I was going to join and be in the reserves. And when I talked to the recruiter and he told me what all goes into it, I was like, well, that's genius. I can be a firefighter and be a Marine, and I could do 30 years in both, get full retirements out of 2 different. I get to be crazy. I get to blow up things because I'm infantry heavy weapons specialist, and I get to go put out fires and stay in shape. Like, it's the best of both worlds. What woman isn't going to want that guy as the wife, as the husband, and to be a wife for him? And if you're raising kids, my dad worked at sewer plants, so whenever I go to visit Dad at the plant, I hate it because it smells like literally raw sewage. I don't want that from my family. That's not my future. I want my kids to look up to me and, hey, Dad's a Marine, Dad's a firefighter. You can do anything, as opposed to, hey, you work construction. It's what everybody does. You work at a sewer plant. It's what we do. So I show up to boot camp January 10th of 2000, and it was what I expected it to be. It was rough. I will still say, and this leads to a later question of which was the tougher one, right? The Marine Corps or the Rangers? What was the harder of the two? They're definitely both different, but I would say, as far as psychological goes, I've never been through anything mentally harder than Marine Corps boot camp, ever. And that includes Ranger School and, team leader training in the Ranger Regiment and other stuff that you've been through in the tracks that I've been on. But I would say physicality goes, Ranger School. It's just infantry school in the Marines was hard, but Ranger School definitely, physically speaking, it was really just destroys you. Well, it did back then because they've changed it now. But I went through when it was still fully hard. Very, very little food, almost no sleep for 5 days while you're doing your patrols. And you're a zombie when you came back. I lost 30 pounds, and Marine Corps boot camp, I didn't gain or lose a single pound. I converted, I'm sure, but I didn't gain or lose a pound. So I show up to boot camp already in shape. I already know all my general orders. Like, I am always the prepared kid. I'm the nerd who shows up already ready. And when I say nerd, I mean, I'm doing, 4 or 5 miles a day running. And I went to high school, my high school team, my senior year, I went to state for the 2-mile race. So I was already in good running shape. And so I show up to boot camp. the first PT test, automatically they separated me and 2 other guys. We were the only 3 that maxed the run. So I ran a 17:30 for my first 3 mile in boot camp. 18 minutes and under is a max score. And again, out of all of boot camp, for all these guys that are going to start the training, only 3 of us made it in 18 minutes or less. So from then on, you're in running for Marine Corps Ironman. It's like the big thing at the end as the most physically fit Marine out of everybody, of all the companies, all the series. So I'm in running for that. And I'm just like not expecting that I'm going to show up to boot camp and I'm going to not only like fit in, but actually be at the top of one of the heaps. And of course I passed the other sets, the pull-ups and the sit-ups and all that. But I didn't max out on the pull-ups. And one of the other dudes did. And he was a police officer at the time, I'm right out of high school. So when I went through physically, it really wasn't nearly as difficult for me because I was a runner. And that's whenever people ask me if they're going to go to boot camp, I say, well, you better be running miles because you're going to be able to do push-ups. And it doesn't matter if you're good at push-ups or not. You're still going to be doing the same number of push-ups. They're going to keep you there on the quarter deck as long as they want to. And it doesn't matter if you really performed 200 push-ups in perfect form or 100 or 50. As long as you keep pushing, that's all that matters. So I would say boot camp for me overall was a very life-changing moment because it really drilled down to who I was on the inside. I'd grown up as kind of an obese kid with buck teeth because in my childhood, I was kind of I was taken out into the woods and made to fight other kids. And we had a little bit of a rough childhood with my cousins. So I'd had my teeth knocked out in fist fights, more of them pounding on my face and less fighting back initially. And then, so I had to grow up just not liking to be in photographs. And so my mom had very few photographs of me as a kid because I would refuse. I would make a face. I would run away. I didn't want my picture taken. And so I had that mentality was still in me. But Marine Corps boot camp, it really peeled away those layers and it showed me that who I was on the inside was somebody who would keep pushing when other people were giving up. I would push. There was on the very end, the crucible, there was a night resupply hike and you had to carry ammo cans full of dirt, sand, or rocks from this place to this other point. The whole time you're supposed to pass it to other guys and everybody does like an Indian run and peels off and goes to the back. So that way nobody's stuck carrying it for long periods of time. Their handles were all broken off on purpose. So it was baling wire, which will cut through your hand. So you had to have your leather glove on. And so it still cuts into your hand. It doesn't feel good. And so I get on there with a squad leader and he starts literally crying, like bawling like he's a 20-year-old dude and he's crying. And the drill instructor keyed in on that. Well, I'm on the other side of that. And so he told everybody to go and made us stay back. And we had to go the next 2 miles straight, just me and him. And while he's screaming at this squad leader. And I, at that moment, was so just like exhausted and it hurt and I was normal. And then something happened. He's screaming in this kid's ear. And I got so angry at him because he's putting us in this position and he won't stop crying. So I'm screaming at him and I now have all the energy. And I realized that I had another gear that I didn't realize I ever had. And so at that moment specifically, because I start dragging him and the drill instructors then, of course, love to see that. Anytime you can make another person suffer while they're trying to make them suffer, all the better, right? And so I'm dragging Cushel and I'm screaming at him to keep up, stop crying and all of this. And it just, I don't know. I think that was the first time I'd ever really been allowed to an appropriate way in an appropriate place, just yell at somebody and scream at them and belittle them, but I wasn't trying to belittle. I was trying to motivate him initially, but he just wouldn't. And so now I'm going to drag us there. And if you fall down, you hold on to that, and I'm going to drag us both there. We're still going to get it across the line. One of the interesting things that happened in boot camp, we were on the third level, platoon 2027, senior drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Oliveira, kill, kill, kill. We were on the third story deck, and we would always see the other guys getting thrashed. It was H formations at MCRD San Diego. And so we would see the other guys getting thrashed. And this other platoon was the one that was also doing terrible in drill. We won the swimming competition. We won the little shark trophy and prac. And so prac, practical exam, we actually set the new record for MCRD San Diego. No prac test had ever been passed at that high of a percentage. We had 0 failures, and I think it was like 90. It was like your body temperature. It was like 98.6 is what it was. And that was with a couple of absolute certified idiots that weren't, like, you couldn't get those guys to put 2 sentences together that made perfect sense, but somehow they had pulled it off and we passed prac. And our drill instructor had just previously with our other platoon before us had set the new record. So this was us resetting that. So it was like, that was our 2 things. We knew we were going to get destroyed in drill, but luckily we can always look over here at these guys because they also suck at drill and they're going to get destroyed just like we are. And sure enough, we're doing all of our, mountain climbers, and we're running around and destroying the squad bay, and they're dumping our foot lockers, locking all the locks together, spray painting them all black and giving us 2 minutes to undo it or we're getting destroyed. And so pouring bleach on all of our clothes. We have to go back and buy all new. Everything in our locker was destroyed. We had to throw it in the trash and go back and buy an entire new whiskey locker, including all of our stuff, but also for the whole whiskey locker to keep the squad bay clean. And we were all like, you can't do that, but they did it anyways. But again, we could always look over here and there's always somebody else suffering. And then they just disappeared one day. We literally get up, we go out and we go do whatever we're doing that day. We come back, we're getting destroyed, and we look over and there's nobody there. I'm like, they can't go up north. They're not going to Pendleton. We're not in team week. Where could they possibly be? And like the next day they aren't there. The next night they're not. And it's just like, that's weird. Somebody goes to medical and comes back with a story. And he's like, so guess what happened to the platoon? All of them got sent home, never to be Marines. The drill instructors are currently getting dishonorably discharged, according to what we heard. And I was like, wait, what's happening? How did you know that? And he's like, there's a guy that's actually fighting for his life right now that they decided to do the sock party from Full Metal Jacket, only they decided to put combination locks in their sock instead of the soap. So the difference there was, yeah, they might have killed him. We don't know if that guy survived or not, but they busted him up really bad. So he was in intensive care. And I mean, I can't even imagine for that family. We have an idiot, and in our platoon, we had the screw up, and everybody wanted to do a sock party on him too, and they talked about it quite regularly. But I think, luckily, they didn't do that. But also, after seeing that happen, I think everybody kind of heard that and kind of took a step back and like, guys, this can get to be too much, and this is just boot camp, We're trying to learn to be Marines. We don't need to literally try to kill people here. So what they did instead is every fire watch would go by and would take his mattress and flip him out of his mattress onto the floor. And all drill instructors know everything that's happening. And I think the first couple times that happened, the drill instructors came out and inquired as to why this guy just got thrown out of his bed in the middle of the night. But then they stopped coming out of the duty hut, and then it just was a thing. This guy is going to be laying on the deck with his mattress probably laying over him. And that's how he sleeps now. And every time he would get back in the bed, the next fire watch would flip him out onto the floor. And that's how he slept. It never taught him anything, obviously, and he definitely didn't stop screwing up. But that was just his boot camp experience for quite a while. Wow. He tried to fist fight one guy that was a little bit, he was a smaller guy. Unfortunately, that made it even worse because then he almost felt bad for him because he's small. He's got to carry the same weight, but his ego was just astronomical. and pugil sticks. They put me up against him. And he informed me right before we went to swinging that he is a black belt in multiple forms, including with the bow staff. It's like, all right, bro. And then we turn around and I just pummeled him. And that was him, though. He would never get it. He never got it. His ego was so big, it was just never going to be popped. And to this day, I hope he learned his lesson, because he made boot camp so much harder on himself and us than it had to really be. So 9/11, at the time I was in my paramedic course, because again, I was working to be a firefighter, and I had just worked a 16-hour shift, and I was coming home. I was working as an EMT / security guard at this big, huge 7 warehouses in Oklahoma City. And I was coming home, and I just heard, I was falling asleep at the wheel, almost crashed a couple times. And I just heard the rock radio station, which I was blasting. He came on the radio and said some small little Cessna or some little plane had accidentally crashed into one of the towers in New York City. And they're like, can you double check that? How did they do that? And then that was it. They're like, I don't know. Everybody's kind of putting this out. So that's interesting. I don't know. We'll follow up if there's any more details. And I turn off the radio when I get home. I go in and go to sleep. And this was back, there were no cell phones. So I just turned the ringer off on my little landline and went to bed. 8 hours later, I wake up and I've got dozens of messages on my phone. And then I go in and see the replays of what happened in the towers, getting hit and falling. And the next day I quit my job. I said, hey, I'm Marine infantry. I'm in the reserves. They're going to call us up. We're already going to be going. My unit had already called me. Get your bags by the door. The second we say drive up here, be ready. And I was. And so I'm just like, okay, here's my 2 weeks notice, boss. May not be able to be here for 2 weeks, wherever they need to pull us. And then nothing happened. And then nothing happened. And it was just, every time I call the unit, they're just like, I don't know, man. We're just hanging tight. Okay, well, is there anything else I can do? And they're like, no, just hang tight. And so for me, though, that moment changed me, because I thought we're going. That's the whole reason I joined the Marine Corps infantry, heavy weapons, and then nothing. This is anticlimactic. I'm just sitting here on my hands waiting. Meanwhile, from then on, until I ended up deploying, until I ended up leaving to re-enlist in the Ranger Regiment, every morning, I didn't wake up by an alarm clock. Every morning when the sun would first start to peak, it would wake me up. And the sun wasn't coming through the windows, but it's just, my brain was just waking me up every morning, and I saw every sunrise. And it was just like, there was this, I just didn't need as much sleep. I don't know how to describe it. I was so focused on, I need to get over there. How dare they do this to our country? Seeing the thousands of people being killed and seeing the footage, people falling and all of those, and hearing the stories, I think, just like Pearl Harbor was for a lot of those people, like, even if they weren't obviously there, like, they hear about these people that have been killed that are Americans. So for me, that changed everything for me and my whole life's trajectory. I'm not going to be a firefighter anymore at that moment. I'm going to go overseas, and I'm going to do this, whatever it is, and whatever that looks like. And hopefully I live, but if I don't, I already know where I'm going. And I think that gets back to, my religious viewpoint and my very, very strict self-imposed religious upbringing, and just never wanting to give up my belief in God, and knowing that if I die for my country, there's no greater cause. There's no better way to go out. And again, from somebody with my background, like, what would that mean for my family to be a Gold Star family? Obviously not like I'm hoping that happens, but even if the worst case happens, I'm in heaven now, and, my family knows that. I just, that's the way I saw it. So it was a win-win for me. So for me to change over to the Army was obviously it was an ego hit, to be honest. That was the very first thing I was thinking. And when I was checking out of the unit, everybody gave me grief about, especially because I ended up with a Ranger contract. And it wasn't a guarantee. Obviously, I still have to go try out. And so I knew that in my mind. And I had in my mind, like, the Marine Corps pushed me to who I am now, but I need to go to another level. And no matter what contract was offered to me, I'm only going up, right? And they try to screw you over, especially Army recruiters. They'll try to screw you over and give you these little crappy contracts. No, I'm like, I want something that does something harder than what I was doing in the Marines. And so when we're looking at that, because I was infantry in the Marine Corps, I had already surpassed the Army basic training, so I didn't have to go to that. But what ended up kind of screwing me over was I'd already been through Marine Corps infantry school, and the pipeline into the Ranger Regiment of 11 Bravo, which is their infantry, they won't break up that pipeline. Again, September 12th, in that time frame, they were strict on some things and loose on others, but this one they were not going to budge on. So I'm like, okay, then I got to figure it out. I've got to figure it out. So then the recruiter finally calls me and says, hey man, I've got a Fort Observer slot in the Ranger Regiment, a guaranteed tryout. You'll go to FO school in Lawton, then you go to airborne school, then from there you get a tryout. It's 3 weeks through RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program. If you successfully pass that, then you actually get to go to a Ranger Regiment. And I was like, why didn't you tell me that before? Of course I'll sign for that. And he was totally surprised because he knew I was all about infantry and getting to carry a gun. But in the Marine Corps, so I was in 29 Palms, and we had some snipers show up, and they're in ghillie suits, and then they go off into the distance, just walk off, right? And they're going to go do what they do while we're there doing our training. And when we had Fort Observers show up in ghillie suits, look just like snipers, and then they just walked off into the desert to go do what they do. I didn't know what a FO was and really what they, again, no Google, no way to ask people. The interesting thing was I'd asked somebody who knew of Rangers, and he said, listen, man, I can't tell you what it's like today. All I know is nobody likes Rangers except Rangers, and nobody likes to work with Rangers really except for other Rangers. So that's all I can tell you, man. They're rough to the point to where it goes kind of beyond like logic. They're just going to make things suck just to make it suck worse. And that's all I got for you. So but that's the knowledge I have to go be a Ranger. So I still have no idea what I'm doing. I end up showing up April of 2002, go to Lawton, which I'm already in Oklahoma. It's right down the road. So I go there. I get to drive my car. That's cool. But I'm just hanging out there going through this course. Now, I get to the end. One of the instructors hated my guts. I'm sure that his wife maybe had relations with Marines in the past or something, because he hated my guts from the second that I walked into the course. And so me being prior Marine, he always harped on me and always made fun of me being a jarhead and an idiot, right? Even though I passed everything fine. Then comes the day where we do our final exam. We go up on top of this hilltop. There's no mountains in Oklahoma, but a big hill at Fort Sill, and you look over and you call in fire on this little tank, And so we do that. Well, guess what? It's April. It's springtime. It's tornado season. So a tornado is already starting to form. There's a supercell that's forming over Lawton. And so they're going to try to rush us through. Well, of course, my name's Ryan, so I go at the end. So everybody else is getting to go through, and it's dark, so it makes it harder to really judge the distance. They're doing their calls for fire. Then I get up. And right now, the tornado's already literally starting to form. And so headquarters calls, and they make us come down from the mountaintop, from the hilltop. And now we just have to go down and bunker in place and wait for the tornado to stop, because it actually does start to form. So now I'm like, well, how do I pass? Like, it has to be today. So they put me on the game, the computer game that you do your training with. That's not reliable. It's not even close to reliable. And everybody's always horrible at that. And he loved it. So guess what? I failed. So now he's wringing his hands. He loves it. So now he has some other idiot call me on the phone and tell me that I'm going to go be a Fort Observer in a mechanized unit somewhere, and that I'm going to be riding around in tracked vehicles. And I'm like, no, my contract still says Ranger. He's like, well, you get one more attempt. You get recycled right now. You get one more attempt. And if you don't pass that, you're going to be mine anyways. And I was like, then I guess I better pass that next time. And of course you're an ignorant Marine, blah, 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 and gave me the works, right? I didn't care. It's a last attempt. I don't know, but I better figure it out. And then I go up, I get my final, after listening to him make fun of me all over again in a new class. And then I get to the end and I call in fire. And you got to have effects on rounds. Your rounds have to have effects on the target. So I call in one and it lands close. But I call in, I do a little bit of adjustment, and now it's off. And now I've got to call in a third. And if it does not go back and on target and have effects, I fail and I'm going to be mechanized infantry. I'll never be a Ranger. So I call it in, and the number that I gave was a little bit overcorrective because of where they'd sent it. Whenever I called in the second, it shouldn't have been over there, but it was anyways. And so I got to do it. And so I call it in and it lands and it fire for effect. I hit it. And that dude was standing there just cussing me out. You better go down and give that guy a nice massage for whatever it was that he pulled out that allowed you to pass this course, because you were about to be mine. And I was just laughing the whole time. And I'm like, God, there's a reason God let me survive that one. But that definitely humbled me because, again, I'm coming from the Marine Corps to the Army, and now I'm in the Army. And I realized that the Army is not here to accept me with open arms. The Army is not here to hold me up as this guy because I come from the Marine Corps. It's the opposite. They hate me because I come from the Marine Corps, and they're going to treat me worse, not better, because I come in from the Marine Corps. And so I just had to recognize that going in. And that was a theme all the way through the Rangers, like my whole career. If you were coming from the Marine Corps, you're going to get hazed a lot being a Marine. So from there, now I'm going to go to airborne school, and then I'm going through RIP. So yeah, Ranger Indoctrination Program, which obviously it's changed now, it's RASP. Back then it was just a gut check. They just destroy you for 3 straight weeks. And if you could survive at the end of that, and you didn't do anything stupid to get yourself kicked out, then you passed. I was a forward observer, and one thing I didn't know was a big advantage because there was only 2 of us in the whole class. Now, I did very well. Again, I'd mentioned a physically fit, and I'm always kind of pushing myself and helping to kind of push other guys. I'm more of a leader at that point in RIP. I was definitely helping other guys. Then comes the day where we're going to graduate, and there's me and this one other guy, and this other guy had been recycled from a previous class, and everybody just kept saying he's kind of a turd. He's not terrible. He's just lazy. He's just not a leader. And that's all I knew. But then he comes to me on the side the day before graduation and says, "Hey, Ryan, I just wanted to let you know, man, I really need to go to 2nd Ranger Battalion, which is all the way up in, Tacoma, Fort Lewis, in Seattle area, because my dad is dying of cancer and I really want to be with him." And I'm thinking, then why'd you join the military? And know that you could have got sent somewhere else. So immediately it makes me angry at him because I think you're just playing me. I think you want to go there and you know that you got recycled, and they're probably going to ask me first because of how I performed and how you didn't perform in this class. So the day comes, they bring us over. All right, Ryan, where do you want to go? 1st Battalion, Savannah, Georgia. 2nd Battalion, Tacoma. And I look at him, and the instructor already knows. And he goes, "Do not look at him. Look at me. I'm asking you a simple question." So he already knew that this guy was going to probably try to pull that on me. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be a good person, and I'm not going to go against my training, my wisdom through life, through the Bible of being a good person. And if this guy is lying to me, that's on him. But if this guy's telling me the truth and his dad dies of cancer and I'm there and I'm not seeing, and he's not around his dad, in the final years of his life, how crappy would I feel for the rest of my life? Long story short, I tell him, I'll take 1st Battalion. And the instructor got angry with me. He's like, are you sure you want to go to Savannah, Georgia? Because we'd already been talking amongst each other. Everybody knew where they wanted to go, and especially me, because I wanted to go to 2nd Battalion. And he's like, all right, well, you're going. And he got mad at me. He's like, then that's where you're going. And then just kind of, was disgusted that I just let this guy play me. Long story short, 60 Minutes on TV many, many years later. I say many, several years later, Pat Tillman, unfortunately, ends up getting killed by friendly fire. And he's one of a panel of Rangers that were on this TV program being interviewed about the Pat Tillman incident. And come to find out, I looked into it and I reached out to some people. Come to find out, he was telling the truth. His dad really did have cancer, and he really was able to see him and spend time with him. And his dad, got to see him as a Ranger because his dad couldn't travel. He was in a bed. So I think that was one of those moments in my life where I recognize, making the right choice, even if it doesn't seem like it, sometimes it actually pays off. And, again, I think God blessed me for that. So from there, now I'm checking into the unit. I'm getting destroyed as soon as I get there because I'm a Marine, because they just had, Croce, Anderson, and Commons had just been killed at Operation Anaconda, Roberts Ridge. And so now while I'm getting destroyed, they're beating into my head like, this is what we're about to go back to. So when I show up, which was in August of 2002, they were getting ready for a deployment. Also, the barracks that we're living in at that moment, now they've been torn down, were condemned, all black mold. So immediately upon getting there, they call it the black lung, right, from Zoolander. Literally, I started spitting blood out of my lungs. I've got pneumonia and bronchitis, and I'm spitting blood out of my lungs. So that's what happens very first thing. So I can barely breathe, and I'm not somebody who was ever sick as a kid. So I'm absolutely miserable while I'm getting destroyed. The only person that's nice to you, because everybody else is getting ready for combat, they could care less about you, new guy, is, some random guy, and they're having him, he's actually being nice to me, and we're going on little working parties and sweeping and doing whatever stupid thing. And everybody's like, hey, you shouldn't be hanging out with him. I don't have any other friends. Everybody else is just destroying me. I don't want to be around anybody. And everybody's hazing me, and everybody's making me sing the Marine Corps hymn while I'm doing push-ups, And then somebody finally was like, he's getting kicked out of the regiment, right? And I'm like, no, what? Why? How would I not know? How would I know that? And they're like, yeah, he left, just went AWOL, and went and got a bunch of drugs from some drug dealer and then drove across the country selling drugs. So he's wanted in multiple states, and he's right now getting RFS, relieved for standards, and getting kicked out. But then he's got to go literally face all these charges for all these drug charges. You should not be around him. So that was a eye-opening, like, I wouldn't even imagine that this person, like, you'd expect him to be something else, not the nice guy, not the only guy who's going to be nice to you. But so I really have no friends. The guys that I checked in with, those are my friends. But, my best friend ends up going to Charlie Company. And when you're in a different company, I was in Bravo Company, he was in Charlie. Like, I never saw him. He's doing his training. He's getting hazed. I'm getting hazed. The Alpha Company guys, we're just spending all of our time getting destroyed and trying to stay away from everybody. Because that's all your life is, especially when you're back. And the only guys that are coming in while you're there are guys coming back from Ranger School. Now they're allowed to smoke you because they're not just a Ranger. Now they're in leadership role. And the one thing they want to do most in life is smoke new guys. So that's all that happened. And so I would literally just be running from room to room trying to hide from people, and they'd be drunk coming in. Didn't matter. 2 a.m. There's no rules. So they would be like, new guy, banging on the door. Come out and play with us, new guy. And I'm trying to run because the bathrooms are connected. So I tried to run through this room and get in another room that was unlocked because everybody's gone. And so, yeah, that was it. Like, most of it's just spent time being hazed. one of my buddies, it got so bad, he started just sleeping downtown on benches. And the police kept having to go and get him. They're like, hey, you can't be a vagrant out here. And they're like, yeah, dude, it's the same guy. You keep sleeping on benches down here. You're in the military. Go to the military. And they didn't get it. And I'd heard stories from guys in the other companies where they were hanging guys out of the windows in sleeping bags. They would call it the cocoon. So they would hang them out of the sleeping bag over a 3rd-story building, and you would just sleep in the cocoon. And then in the morning, they'll bring you back in, but you got to come out like you're a butterfly. And so it was just the dumbest things you could possibly imagine. But again, there is no hazing. There's no rules as long as you're not breaking them. And I will share one story of a new guy who shows up, and he ends up getting broken. I was a corporal later on, but we got in a batch of new guys. And the very first thing, you're getting hazed, you're having to climb up to the top of this rope, and it's like 30 feet up, slap the top of the log, and you have to, repeat either the Ranger Creed or something that they want you to repeat. And it's usually the Creed because they want to make sure you have it memorized. So he does that, but he does it for so many times that his arms are failing, right? He's finally reaching muscle failure, but he's too stupid to do that intelligently. And so he just thinks that these guys are just going to, really know when to pull the plug. Well, they didn't. Just keep going until you are exhausted. And so he goes up and he slaps it. And when he does, he ends up losing his hand and he falls 30 feet, hits the ground. Now the medic comes over and gets him on the gurney, and the guy's team leader is screaming, cussing it at him for getting broken because now he's going to get written up. And that was just like I guess the new guy's broke. Like you don't think anything of that. It's like this dude probably just broke multiple bones and he's going to be jacked now, but it's Ranger Regiment. Like, I'm not saying that was an everyday occurrence, but at the same time, you've already seen enough. That wasn't that shocking. And it certainly wasn't that shocking. We blame him. I'm like, what an idiot. Why would you do that? Fall down halfway. Be smart if you're going to do something and get yourself possibly hurt that bad. But again, when you go into the regiment and you're not ready to give everything, but have some common sense, you can get broken and it can be permanent. And we had another new guy, and I heard about it. I actually wrote about it in my journal. So I got to read that before I came to speak with you. And I was rereading it. He was a brand new guy, had just made it through RIP, and he was a finance guy. So he's not even going to be out here going with us on objectives. And they had put him on a helicopter and been doing elevators, right? You fly up, go over this little mountain town, you rappel onto the roof, take over the building as you go down the stairs and do that. And then you come back out to the helicopter, fly up. They just call it elevator because that's all you do all day and all night. You're just doing elevators. I don't know why, but they had him doing that right out of the gate. He just got in country and they sent him to go do elevators. And so he's doing it. And the rope came off of the roof. Well, the pilot, who was not 1/60th like we always have, was regular Army. And the rope had come back and swung down. So the guy stops him and hey, let's get the rope back on. So he does the hand on arm signal, get it back on. He does. The guy grabs a hold of the rope and he goes, we're good. The guy, he slaps him to go down the rope. He swings out. The pilot cuts the rope. He thought this meant we're good, cut the rope. We can go back over here and set down. So that kid swings out just as the rope is cut, and he drops at least 20 feet onto a pipe sticking up out of the roof. It broke his ribs. It broke multiple bones, obviously, where he landed, but it had, what I heard was, and wrote down, it had ruptured his kidney. And so they were metaflighting him out. Day one in country. Welcome to the Ranger Battalion. So that kind of stuff can happen. Needless to say, we never saw that pilot again. I don't know where he went, but he wasn't ever around us ever again. So, and that's what can happen when you're not working with the best guys, right? They're not on the same wavelength. They're not paying attention. They're not second guessing and thinking. So another day that was, interesting / par for the course, was, I remember it was lunchtime. So everybody's kind of at that moment, we're just kind of doing our own thing. We're back home. We're not deployed at this point. I think I'd been back. I think we had just gotten back. So we're still, we got off of a deployment. We've been doing some missions, and so there's never a time that it's safe for a regular Army guy to drive over to the Ranger Battalion, park on our grass, and blast some rap music. But he decided that's what he was going to do that day. And nobody can figure out why this idiot decided to randomly pull on our grass and then blast music, no matter what it is. And he just decided to do it that day. And he was kind of a very large body, chunky dude, staff sergeant. And he's just sitting on our grass doing that. One of the just regular PFCs is walking over to let this guy know to move, get out of here. I don't know why you're here, but you don't need to be staying here. And a PFC coming over to tell a staff sergeant he needs to turn his trash music off and get out of here. He didn't take too kindly, so he gets out of his car. And he's way bigger than the PFC that's talking to him. But that particular PFC was a spark plug. That dude was just wired from birth. And so the number of hits that it took and the speed that guy took hits was kind of blinding for us. Like, all we saw is this guy stand up, and he kind of dwarfs from where we're standing, and then his head starts doing this, and then he falls down, crumples unconscious. And then the PSC grabs him, kind of shoves him into the front seat, turns his radio off, turns his car off, and throws the car keys on him. And then he just stayed there. And eventually he woke up from his unconscious state and drove away. But what were you expecting? and you're at a different, like, we are a different base, technically speaking. Like, these are our grounds, and we're technically special operations, not Army. So it's this weird thing where the MPs on the base, their rules don't necessarily, they apply to us, but to a certain extent. They can't come onto our base and come and arrest somebody. They can't show up, and if we run from the police, they can't chase us onto our base. It's like, we're on base. You can't come get us. They have to have somebody come with them and escort them on, and they have to do it that way. Well, you tell MPs that. They don't think that it's, they think that they have this whole base and it's theirs. The rules just didn't apply. So the one thing I have to put in, everybody has to have this perspective so that they understand. Whenever I first joined the regiment, again, I didn't know what a Ranger was until I was wearing a tan beret. And even then, when I checked into my unit, I still don't know what I actually do. The very last day of RIP, you get to raise your hand and ask the instructor questions. And I literally asked my instructor, what do I actually do as a forward observer? Because in FO school, all they teach us is artillery. And I already know that the Rangers aren't running around with artillery. So what am I really actually going to be doing? He's like, forward observer, you're going to be calling in, airstrikes from jets, from, helicopters, spooky gunships, everything. Basically, they can call for fire from everything. So you're going to have fun. Don't worry about it. That was it. That's what I now know of my job is in the Ranger Regiment. And I haven't trained 1 second on how to do any of that. So that was the weird part for me, is I'm going to check in, but I still don't even know how to do my own job. So this is probably not going to be fun. And my very first combat mission was the Jessica Lynch rescue. So when I am going to go on this mission, I have no idea what to expect, because they wanted to keep the details from us until we actually got out to where we were staging. They fly us out there. We were at the RR airport, ARAR, there in Saudi Arabia, just a few miles from the base before, the invasion is happening. The 507th gets, we all know that this has happened. 507th gets cut off. Jessica Lynch is on that, in that convoy, and multiple soldiers have been, as far as we know, multiple have been taken. Several had died at the scene from the actual crashes and the RPGs and fire, but some had been taken. We don't know all the details, but we're, seeing that on Fox News were seeing that. And then they say, all right, we've got a mission. We're pushing forward. We all just fly over to this spot. And it's bombed out jet hangars where Saddam used to have all of his jets during Desert Storm. We dropped bombs on those and blew them all up. They still exist as a frame, but they have a big hole in them. That's where we were actually at. And this was super fast. We show up there and we're all in chemical suits. Now, that was the big thing that we were just like, okay, what are we doing? Why are we in chemical suits? We know that they haven't been using chemical weapons so far, and they're already pushing, toward Baghdad already. And then they let us know, all right, hey guys, now that we can't make phone calls, not that we really could anyways, but there's no way we could have screwed this up by letting it cat out of the bag that we were going to be doing this mission. So we are now training to go out and do this rescue mission. And basically they're describing it as this whole city of Nasiriyah we've had to push through. The Marines tried to get a foothold there at the base of the city during the invasion, and they were actually pushed out. So all they have is Marines there by the main road, Highway 1, and that's where this evidently doctor, that's what we were told, had walked all the way from the city out to where these Marines were, which was nearly 10 miles, and told them that there is a girl, Jessica Lynch, who's being held at this hospital right outside the city. But it's built with a huge concrete wall all the way around it and a military barracks built literally around and inside, around the hospital, inside that structure. And so we're like, okay, this is going to be the fight of your lives, gentlemen. Think of what happened in Black Hawk Down. That's what we're about to go into. They're fully dug in. They know we're coming. We're going to be at a total disadvantage. And the whole city is full of fighters who have all gathered there and obviously put up a very strong fight against the Marines. So we know that they've done nothing but improve everything since then. And they know we're coming in to get Jessica and the other soldiers. But we know for sure they said that she was alive. That's confirmed through this person. So that's what we're going to go do. And we arrived. It was already nighttime. It was already getting nighttime. We weren't doing it that night. It was going to be the next night. And of course, just as a human, I'm just like, I want to just go right now, right? But we need to plan. And the plans had already been in place. But we're wearing chemical weapons. We already know that's going to be a disaster because you're wearing basically a sauna suit times 3 trying to go do a mission like Black Hawk Down, where all these guys are going to come flooding out of the city and just hail of fire, right? Just a hail of gunfire and RPGs. So we're going to fly there, and they're going to do it in sets where they're going to pick us up in these Chinooks. Evidently, one of the other guys that I was on the mission with remembered they were the CH-46s that the Marines had, not the Army version, because they were a little bit smaller. And they're going to pick us up and drop us off and come back and pick us up and drop us off. So it's not going to be a one movement. It's going to be multiple, even worse. Now we're going to be separated from each other if they start taking fire. So we're just like, could this mission get any worse for us? Like, how could this get worse? It was the only time that I actually got to meet Pat Tillman, because Pat was there. And while we were just kind of hanging out and walking around, I got to at least say hi to him or walk past him and he actually asked me where the bathroom was, and I told him where it was. I never want to be that nerd him and go, oh man, I want to get your autograph. But it was obviously he was somebody that we all looked up to. And that's, the bracelet I wear today. And I have several other bracelets with a lot of names on it, but I don't want to walk in clanging for a podcast. But at the same time, the guys that I did serve with, that I mentioned, that leadership and those people, they're so formative in us being able to accomplish the Jessica Lynch mission and all the other missions going forward that I'll detail. But it's like we go in and it seems like it's just going to be a disaster, but it wasn't. And it was, everybody got in line, everybody got together. We're all running our lasers, and we've got Spooky flying overhead, I believe, the Spectre gunships. with the 105, the 25 millimeter, the 105 howitzer, 40 millimeter, and 25 millimeter. So they can lay down a lot of fire. That's what they didn't have at Black Hawk Down. It was denied by the Clintons. And that was one of the big things that they were really upset about when everything came out about Black Hawk. But we're going to have them on this one. And we're going to have the little birds flying, buzzing right overhead. So we're feeling good about that. And we have a few Marines in tanks, and one Abrams were actually there that they brought in because they were expecting this whole city to come out at us. And so they were there somewhere. So we get out of the helicopter and we're a click away. So we're a kilometer away. But when they dropped me off at the kind of in this little sandy deposit, and then you climb over this berm, and then it's flat. Now the ground is here. So you're underneath the ground over here for whatever reason, that's little spot. That's where we climb up to. And now I'm looking at it under nods. We had monocle, right? You just had one on one eye, and then this is open. You had to train your brain to be able to use one eye's open, and that depth perception, you could still have depth perception doing that. But what was crazy to me is because we're in pitch black. There's no electricity out here. They had already cut off electricity to the hospital for a long time. So the trash smells horrible. You can already smell that. And the whole facility, though, was very, very dark, but we're lighting it up with AR. So through your eye, it's just black. Through your monocle, through your night vision, it's laser, Pink Floyd laser light show. Everybody's got their PQ2s. They're buzzing by with these big, huge spotlights over the hospital and shining it. But through your eye, you're seeing nothing. So what they're all seeing at that time, the enemies, they're just nothing. There's just all this noise of this helicopter buzzing over, but they can't see anything. And there were evidently a couple guys who came out from the city who wanted to meet Allah that day, and they were obliged. They got blown away very quickly, and nobody was even close to getting hurt because, again, they just come out and sprayed into the air, and they just got mowed down by some machine gun fire. But that was it, right? We think we're going into the fight of our lives. But we get up to the hospital. We end up blowing a hole in the side of the 8-foot concrete cinder block wall that was around the whole facility, and they have a big metal gate in the front. So it's not like a normal hospital. Theirs, it was kind of a compound. So we blow a hole in the side, and we got a couple of really huge Rangers that beat the rest of it in with big sledgehammers they were carrying in mop gear. And we go in through the side, and now we fan out and start clearing rooms and taking over. The whole military barracks is right there, and we're expecting it to be full. People dug in. Nobody's there. And it's just every turn, it's nobody's there. And then we actually get over to the hospital itself, the front, and that's when I take a knee. They're like, she's coming out. We'd already seen the helicopters land on the roof, and that's where the sick DevGru guys, the SEALs, had come in from the roof, and they were going to take over the hospital. They were going to clear the hospital from the top down, and then we were going to get to the hospital and clear from the ground up to kind of find her and the others. And literally they sprinted. Like, they landed, and we blow a hole through the side of the wall. By the time we even get over there to the front of the hospital, we've got her, and they're coming down the stairs with her. So we're like, okay, so the building's not clear. So now we need to go clear that. And I'm just sitting there again, PFC, my first combat mission. And I'm thinking, I hope there's not dug in guys that are actually, this is all a trap, and they're just going to lay waste to you that we haven't even got in to clear. It's just worst case scenario still running in your head, even though it just seems too easy all this way. And then I'm sitting there, and I see through my monocle, I can see them carrying Jessica out to actually get on the helicopter. Helicopter lands, they load her up, and then she takes off. And it was just like, okay, you want to take a breath, but then where's the others? And so we're like, okay, still nothing, still nobody's coming to fire us from the city. We're still waiting. And now the interpreter's talking with the very few handful of people that were there in the hospital, workers there that were actually helping Jessica and being around. and they're keep talking, and it's just stories not making sense. But he keeps talking about the soccer field, right outside of the hospital over to your right. That's where they had a little soccer field right next to it, right next to the hospital. And that's where they would, go out and, I guess, kick the ball around. But he just keeps pointing and directing that's where the others are. And there's that doesn't make any sense, because again, to us, we didn't know that they were buried. We didn't know that they were all dead. We also thought this was a rescue mission for them. We hadn't confirmed that they were alive, but they were able to confirm Jessica. So now this is a recovery mission. I think I still as a human wanted to believe that not all of them were there. Maybe there's a mistranslation. Maybe this guy's wrong. Maybe he doesn't understand what the question is, because they're asking him about soldiers, and maybe they don't know who this is. And maybe all this is a mix-up. All that's still going through my head, but I'm going over, and right at that point, I have control of the air assets. So we're all getting down and providing security, because now we're outside of the wall. Now we're out here in an open field, and there's the city. They could be coming out of anywhere. They could pop up on any roof and start firing RPGs at us. And that's where the digging began. And, I didn't do the digging, and for the men who did, I was there next to the hole, and, the sights and the smells of what I saw them digging and them recovering the bodies is something that obviously, you'll never get over that. And I think it just kind of takes a long time for you to even be able to talk about that. And not many people, even the other Rangers that I know, really want to kind of talk about that. I think we wanted to save Jessica, and we wanted to save everybody else. I think that was what hit me the hardest, was just that it's a recovery, and I didn't expect that. We didn't expect to have to dig, so we didn't bring digging tools, and so everybody's in mop gear. And now we're just like, okay, this is stupid. We're not getting mustard gas over here. Let's take off our mop gear. And finally somebody makes that call, take off your mop jacket. And they're digging with literally their hands. Somebody had, a couple guys obviously probably had e-tools or something, but nobody was ready with big, tools specifically for digging or anything. And this hospital, they didn't have anything around either to use. So it was by hand, and they were so decomposed that they weren't taking the body out as one. It wasn't a whole body that they were having to recover, but we stayed there until they were all dug out, and the sun was coming up, eventually, and we need to be out of here, because if the sun comes up and that city, then now we're all going to be exposed out in the open. Right now, it's still pitch black. There's no moon. We're completely concealed right now, but the time is ticking away. And there was that moment of dread where it's starting to take longer and longer. And for the guys that are digging, they don't care what time it is. They're going to make it, they're going to make it happen no matter what. And I think just, again, I'm never going to try to, portray myself as some hero or I did some heroic things, but God put me in a place where I was able to be with the guys that, did some amazing things, and just being, in those guys' company, I think is the reason why when people ask me about the Marines versus the Rangers, I'm like, I went through a lot of changes in the Marine Corps, and it really made me into the man that I am on the positive, on the discipline side and focus. But the part of me that has now made it through this life into my mid 40s, I'll always remember the amount of sacrifice that the Rangers do and how little is known of that sacrifice, because there's a lot of things that have happened that people have no idea that that the Rangers were a part of, and it's okay, and we're fine with that. I'm not sharing this story or any other in order to make my name known. What I want to do is to, share other people's stories, but they need to relate to me. They need to understand where I'm coming from. And if they have a story where they went through something really rough in war or anywhere, that I can relate, because I've been to dark places, and I've seen as evil as a human can be to another human. But again, I was in the company of heroes who did amazing things, and I got to be a front row seat to that just because, I signed up, I raised my hand, and I did everything I could to be a member of that team. That first mission, and I think this will be hard for most people to understand, but again, I'm a weird guy, if we haven't already established that. My thought process was I wanted to make an impact. I left the Marine Corps to make an impact. I wanted to be a part of something. I wanted to make an impact that other people would know about, not so I can get on 60 Minutes, not so I can be on talk shows, because I wanted, for me and for my family, that I had played a part. I didn't just, die in training. You know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to have been there, accomplished something, been a part of, and once I checked that box at combat mission number 1, now what? And so it really was kind of a conundrum for me, because I had never even thought about that. I never expected that. I remember that sun rose. We did get everybody, we recovered all the bodies. Everybody was able to get back. No one got injured. Nobody got hurt. And we're looking at now the sunrise. And I remember with a couple guys, like, we just, kind of just hugged real quick and just were like, man, that was wild. Like, we expected this to be the fight of our lives. We expected some of these guys around us, maybe us. We're not going to make it back from this mission. That was a reality of what we were likely to go into. And that, I think, it set a precedence for me to where I was good. If I died, I'd already checked the big box that I wanted to. I'd already accomplished what I came to do. So, as I said, it's a little strange, but I was okay dying for my country after that. And the next missions that I would go on, if I die, cool. Like, I'm out. I know where I'm going. Again, I'm not anticipating going to Ranger School yet. We get ready for another deployment, and they do. They send us out. This deployment, we're still in the same BIOP. We're still by the Baghdad International Airport at the SOCOM compound. Now we have vehicles. I actually brought a picture of one of the vehicles that I can show you. It's a Humvee that had been changed. The back end of it, they'd cut that off, and they'd mounted seats and ports to where you can actually mount 240 machine guns and things. So it's just all about no armor whatsoever. And so that's what we went with. So the irony is all the American soldiers were wanting up armor everything. They were wanting more armor for all the IEDs. We did the exact opposite. We stripped away everything that we could. We got faster, and we added more people so we could take more people on objectives, and we could do it, of course, again at night. So that's what we're rolling around in. We have to do guard duty on the vehicles. I'm sitting there one night doing guard duty, and I have to be there for like 2 hours. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm listening to my Walkman, and I hear a thud. I don't know where that thud came from exactly, and I'm kind of looking around. I don't know. And then somebody comes running over to me and like, Ryan, what's up? You okay? And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And they're like, we had just had incoming rounds. And I'm like, okay. And so whoever had seen it where it went in, it had just hit the HESCO that was like probably about 75 feet or 75 yards from me. It had went into the sand. If it had been over 20 yards, it would have exploded. I probably would be dead. but that was so common. I remember being on the phone with my mom. That second deployment, we actually had phones. We could call, and I'm talking to my mom, and incoming rounds start landing, and you can hear stuff exploding. And it's, again, nobody I know has been hit by it. So you just it just is what it is. And my mom's like, hey, what's that noise? What's the loud? I was like, oh, they're watching a war movie behind me, and the tent's very thin. So I just have to lie to her. And that's, again, with her ulcers already from thinking I was dead the first deployment, I'm not giving her more ulcers for the second one. But you're just used to that. You just get used to the idea that when it's your time, it's your time. The interesting thing for my entire enlistment in the Ranger Regiment, that full 3 years, we had 0 fatalities, 0 KIA in combat. Plenty of guys got shrapnel, plenty of guys got hurt. Guys definitely did get shot, but no, we never went to a funeral for one of our own. With British SAS guys, lost guys, the First Armor Division, for some reason they were going to be attached to us for some mission. And literally they were allowed to come into our compound for the first time. And so they're over there hanging out with us. And then like 3 days later, we're going to a funeral for them. And I'm like, well, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, 4 guys were flying around the base I guess in one of their Humvees or something, and went right into an M1 Abrams that was coming up the road. And they literally just pancaked the guys from the First Armor Division. So now we just met these guys. They're just allowed to be here. And now we're going to a funeral for 2 of them, and the other 2 are, in severe critical condition. So they're going to funerals, and they're going to see people that are injured or dead, or somebody got really severely injured, was common. But deaths for us, it's insane to think that you could be in continuous combat for that whole time. My buddies that were in Charlie Company, Alpha Company, I never saw them on deployment. We were always somewhere else. Charlie Company's somewhere else. We're deployed when they're back training. And there was just so much movement. Obviously, it wasn't just like they pick up and go whenever, but at the same time, it was just this, you knew it was going to be constant deployments, and you just got used to the idea of death is going to happen, but it just doesn't keep happening to us. It keeps happening all around us, but not to us. We did have a guy die in training, Brandon Miller, and I remember being there getting ready for the jump. We had just got back from the first deployment. This was actually the Jessica Lynch mission had happened. We got home from the deployment, and they said, because your jump status, you didn't get to jump while you're overseas, you need to make up that jump so you'll still be getting paid jump pay. So we're going to go ahead and have everybody jump real quick, and then we'll go on leave. So we do that. We're all sitting there. We're waiting. We're going to do a night jump. Everybody loads up, and the first chalk goes. We're going on the second one, and we're sitting there. We sit there for hours, forever. They never come back. And we're just like, what is happening? And then finally, they come back and land. A bunch of guys get off fully rigged up. They didn't jump. But not all the guys did, just some of the guys. And they don't say a word to us, don't look at us. They walk in, take their stuff off, and leave. And we're all still sitting here like, what is happening? But we can't leave. And so finally, some of the higher ups that were on the jump with us are getting upset. And they're like, just everything's fine. Let's just go jump real quick. It's going to be a late night. Sorry, guys. Like, okay. So we go and we jump. We get home. Come to find out, Brandon and another jumper, when they jumped, they came out and their parachutes got tangled, and they ended up going end over end and falling. One of the guys pulled his reserve and was able to shoot out of it. Brandon didn't. He hit the ground. And so he ended up somehow still, surviving for several more hours. He didn't die instantly. But his buddy, who he had been tangled up with, they couldn't find him for a long time, because when they were falling, it was zero loom. There's no lights out there. The moon, there was no moon. So the medics that are stationed out there were watching, but then they just kind of burned in, and they didn't know where they were, and they didn't want to drive over them in the field. And so it took them literally, what they told us was it took over an hour and a half, 2 hours to find him. That's why we were sitting for so long. Then they found him, and he was still just trying to hold his buddy's neck together and try to keep him from bleeding out. And he ended up still living until he was in the hospital. And that's when he was finally declared dead. So I remember going to that funeral, and of course, for us, PFC, I'm just like, why would we jump? We just got back from Jessica Lynch. He gets to go home and be a hero. Like, we get to talk about this mission that everybody's been hearing about, but again, nobody knows that that's going to happen on the jump. And it hadn't happened in so long since anybody had been seriously injured or killed. But so we have to go to a funeral before we can even go home to our families. So that was eye-opening. But again, that was the only one during that 2002 to 2005 while I was there of funerals we had for any of our guys. The second deployment was what I usually refer to as the suicide mission, because that's exactly what it was deemed. Now, the only thing I can't remember is which city it was. Unfortunately, I say that up front because I don't want somebody to come out and tell me what it really was, and I'm wrong. But it was a city that was like Nasiriyah or Ramadi or Fallujah. It was a city that had not been fully kind of taken, and there were a lot of fighters that had come from outside of Iraq, and a lot of the original fighters had really built up a stronghold. And the bomb maker was there. The intel we had from all these people that we'd been snatching up on all these missions kept pointing at the same guy. And supposedly this guy is going to be here, and he's going to be here with a cement truck fully loaded. And that cement truck is going to level 4 city blocks if he can get it to the capital, which is what he wanted to do, where we had instilled our, leader for Iraq, and where the city police were. I guess they're right next to each other. His plan was to take this cement truck full of explosives, park it in front of it, just like the Alpha P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City. When that happened, you saw how much damage from even parked a ways from the building it did. And so that was his plan. So we have to go get this guy. And they said, it's during the day. We don't know where he's going to be except for during the day. This is the only time we know. And SEAL Team 6 said, nope, suicide mission. We'll have to do it another time. We'll have to do it when it's night. That would be stupid. We're not going to, that was what we were conveyed. Delta says the same thing. We're not going to go on that. It will be unsuccessful. That would just be a suicide mission. Here's the Rangers. We'll do it then. And so we all know this is 100%. Like, we're going in the middle of the day right into this place that's fully armed to the teeth, ready to annihilate any Americans that come in here. And we are all on no armored buggies. And we're just going to go cruising in there and cruise on out with a bomb maker. That makes 0 sense. And I wasn't even slated for the mission. That was the weird part. So, my buddy Parker, who was another Fort observer with me on my team, he actually was like, hey, Ryan, he's like, you think we could find a way to get on one of these Humvees? And I'm like, no, what? There's no way that they just didn't bother to think about that. Why would that make sense? And he's like, I don't know, man, I'm gonna go look into it. I was like, okay, we'll go look into it then. And I'm thinking he's an idiot. Like, obviously they're not just going to have open spots. And why would you also want to be volunteering for what we just know is a suicide mission? We just heard this. And then he comes back and he's like, yeah, I talked to Sergeant Major Devins. And I was like, And what? He's like, yeah, we could ride on his. He doesn't have anybody in the floor, so we could sit on the floor. And I was like, okay. And it was at that moment that I was like, okay, are we really going to do this? And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it, man. And so I went, got my paper. I hadn't actually written my death letter yet. I wrote a death letter. I sent it to my family. Do not ever open this unless I'm dead. A bunch of other guys were doing that too. And we sent that out and we were like, here we go. This is our way into history. Either it's going to happen. We were going to take him out was the idea. We've got to stop this guy because if he levels 4 city blocks, it's going to destroy everything that we're trying to build in this country. And so we go, and I'm just sitting now. I don't have a radio. I'm just literally a ranger. So packed out with ammo, and we get to we roll into the city, and it's just this most eerie quiet as we're coming up. We had air support. And I don't remember what all air support, but I know we had air support flying overhead. I believe it was Spectre gunships. So again, we have something big above, and then we had a couple of Bradleys that came in with us. And again, that was very rare. That might have been the 1st Armored Division guys in the Bradleys. So we roll in, and we go all the way up to the building. Like this is the shop where he's building the bomb inside this. We're expecting everything to erupt at any moment, and crowds just instantly. It was all men. There's just no women. It was all guys, but there were still kids. And I get off the truck, immediately run over and dive onto the ground, and we're holding. Parker's got security down this alleyway, and I got security here, and it's just filling in with people. And then we hear the first gunshots, brah, brah, and we're like, okay, here we go. And it's at that point we had already been told 82nd Airborne had just gotten hit by children on bicycles, and they said, be on the lookout. You are rules of engagement. You are allowed to engage children on bicycles. Because if there's 2 on the bicycle, be on the lookout. The one on the back has an RPG. And so what they're doing is they're having these kids get on bicycles and ride toward the Americans, and he's holding the RPG behind him. And then as they got closer, he jumps off the back and then fires the RPG and ended up killing some of the 82nd Airborne. So I'm literally seeing that. Now there's 2 kids with a bicycle, and they're popping their head around the corner, and I'm looking at them through my ACOG, and the one kid comes around the corner, and he has something in his hands like a gun. I pop my safety, I pull the trigger, I take the slack out, and I'm looking at this kid, center mass, and I'm thinking, slow, steady squeeze, but I can't see the gun yet. I just see it's because it's still shadow. It's still dark. And then I see it. It's a stick. He's just got a stick. And this kid's like probably 7 or 8 years old. And he's just doing this and doing like this. He's a dumb kid. And I'm just like, okay. I put my safety back on, and I'm just still waiting for it because I heard gunshots. So something's happening. But then nothing. And again, it's just this weird, and then the whole city doesn't collapse on us. And they're like, okay, let's go. After a few minutes, I'm like, okay, we jump back on, and we're just sitting here the whole time, waiting, and nothing happens. They shot his dog. There was a dog came up and tried to like bite one of our guys when they went in the door. So he blasted the dog. We didn't get the bomb maker, but we got his brother. His brother was there, but he knows where the bomb maker is, and he knows where the cement truck is. So it was a success. And I think that was one of the most pivotal moments. One for me, I think just as a person, because I had, volunteered for that mission along with Parker. And because again, I'm not carrying a radio. I'm just a ranger, and I'm going to actually get to just be a ranger on this one. But I think looking back, that kind of now as I'm older and I'm a dad, and I'm just like, I put all of this, on the line for a chance to go in on a suicide mission. And I try to, reconcile that in my head. I think that's one that I kind of buried for a long time. I just never wanted to unpack that. And I never really just wanted to talk about it because I don't really know why I wasn't even on the mission. Is that me trying to tempt God, trying to tempt fate that I really need to die though? Come on, God, I really need to go out a hero here for my family in my weird, twisted way of, again, I want to go to heaven. That's my thing. And, September 11th, this is the most justified cause of our lifetime, and that's, if I'm going to go out, that's how I want to go out. And so after that mission, we ended up going on a lot more. We ended up getting the bomb maker, but there's always more. There's always another bomb maker. There is never one. It was just, he was the guy at that time. And we did get to work with, some of the SAS, Australian SAS guys. Wild, phenomenal dudes to work with. That's the one thing that I will say is one of the SAS guys, we hop in the helicopter with him and we're going to go somewhere. And he's like, Hey, mate, what's that on your rifle? I had a PQ2, the laser system. And I'm like, it's the laser. And he's just got a bare M4, nothing on it, just like sights, and I'm like, wait, that's your rifle? And he just kind of laughs. He's like, yeah, that's all I need. And I was just like, that is like, but with all the technology, there's no way you don't have the money for that. But why? But he was just clean. He just wants a rifle. No extra gadgets. No, but that's just how they were. But man, those dudes were fierce. We ended up going on a mission with them. Now here's the funny part on this mission. This guy, the SAS are the primary for this. And the reason we were told that they were going to run primary, because primarily, specifically the SAS at that time was, we weren't allowed to even say that they were there or that we were working with them. But now there's been multiple books written about it. And if you pick up the book named Task Force Black, I'm not sure who came up with that name, but if you pick up that book, there's a couple of missions in there that I was on. And this is one of them that I'll kind of describe. So when I found that book and I saw that, I underlined it and bought the book immediately, obviously. But we're going out to get these guys because these guys have intel that we need. And that's what we're told from the get-go of this mission planning. The SAS are like, we know that the Rangers are just going to go in and try to kill everybody. So we need these guys alive. So we're going to run the primary. You guys are actually going to help us. Cool. So we go out and we get to the place. It's a terrorist training camp. We're sitting back, my vehicle, in a blocking position at the main road. The guy that is the officer that I don't really know, we'll call him Captain Smith. He has a chest full of every award or every medal from every school you can go to. Interesting. Guys nicknamed him Captain America because he just kind of had that presence about him. He was tall. He was very fit. He's very stoic. Didn't talk a lot. On this mission, he's actually kind of started chatting with me and a couple of the other guys. And so we're watching as nothing is happening. And then we start seeing AK fire. And so what's happening is now they had the interpreters come in with loudspeakers and announce to them, hey, we know you're in there, come out, give up, blah, blah, blah. And the guys come out and just start spraying AK-47 fire. And we're like, well, there's your guys. Go get your intel. Well, on this mission, one of my Fort observers, so one of the FOs and our fire support officer are talking on the radio to each other, but they can't hear each other. But I can hear both of them. And I've got two radios. I don't remember why I had two radios, but I had two radios on this. That's all I was, just a radio guy, again, sitting at the blocking position. And it just so happens I can hear both of them, but they can't hear each other. So I connect. Okay, you guys can hear me. I can hear both of you. You guys aren't getting through. Relay. So I just start relaying information back and forth between them. So this is awesome. I've never got to actually do this before. I'm not getting to call in fire, but at least I'm getting to do this. And it's very, very, obviously with my job, it's very, very specific. You do not forget a number. You don't mix up a number. When they give a position, one number can be the difference between life or death, right? They call in something on the wrong spot. That could be the wrong area and you could get somebody killed. So it's beat into your head as a forward observer. So I'm relaying this and I'm just so focused on this information. And then what do I see? Spectre gunship, 40 millimeter. These guys just, they're gone. And then you see the trucks roll in. Brah, brah, brah. And I'm like, wait, what is happening? The SAS got tired of that. So they just blew the guys away. And we're like, wait, that was the whole, you gave us all this grief for just killing people. And you thought we were not capable of not blowing people up. And that's all you did. You literally got frustrated after a few minutes of some gunfire and just blow these guys away. 40 millimeter specifically, I bring up because we all forward observers know this. The 40 millimeter will set anything on fire. So some of these dudes were on fire when we show up. And there's a funny movie where Hot Shots Part 2, where the guy gets hit and he explodes into the wall. And there was legit, one of the guys had gotten hit and he kind of bounced up to the wall and had been partially melted into the wall. And it was still, part of him was up there, part of him was down here, but it was all melted and on fire. And the whole thing that they're in, there's nothing flammable. It's mud huts. But 40 millimeter, it will set anything on fire. It's not napalm, but it'll get it done. So Saddam, when Delta actually gets him, I remember that like it was yesterday. We're at the compound. We just hear something's happening. Everybody starts running all over the place. That doesn't happen. Everybody is very measured and everybody's walking. And now everybody is running. But nobody's telling us what's going on. And I start seeing that the gators that we're driving, little 6-vehicle things that we would drive around the compound, they're starting to mount weapons on it. They're mounting 240s. They're trying to mount a 50 cal on one of them. And I'm just like, what in the world? Why would we need that here? And then a helicopter comes in and lands. And again, they're not telling us, but a bunch of dudes come in and drop somebody off over where the interrogation area is. That's when we find out eventually within the next morning, Saddam's in there. They got Saddam. He's right behind us. I'm literally sitting, 75 yards from Saddam. He's inside this little building. And now the compound's completely shut. We can't go to the base next door for food. We can't go get anything. All of our shipments are cut off. So we don't have a chow hall. Now we are just eating MREs. And we're sitting they pull a Humvee in front of the gate. And it's all these big blocking things. And we're sitting on a 50 cal doing turns on that 50 cal. And literally, because that next morning, Saddam gets taken, Saddam is brought to us. And already on Fox News that morning, a Geraldo specifically, I'll never forget, is interviewing some random general who we've never seen before, but he's some commentator. And he goes, so General, where would you hold Saddam if you were going to hold him? And he goes, well, I don't know, but I know that this building right here, and zeroes in the map on the building Saddam's in and goes, I would probably hold him right there in this building. It's right near the edge of the tarmac. And this is really where SOCOM tends to be. It's where they were previously. So I'm thinking probably in this area here, but I'd probably have him there. That was the exact building Saddam was in. And we're like, how can that happen? How on Fox News can you have an idiot get up and literally tell the whole world where Saddam actually is? Now, they don't know that's where he is, but it is where he is. So what if they are paying attention? That's when we all were like, if we ever meet Geraldo, we're going to re-break his nose for him. But we were obviously furious, and now our lives are even worse at stake than they were before. And now vehicles are starting to drive past and people are snapping pictures. because they know where that was. They can literally look on a map. Some of them are American soldiers because they're stupid and they want to get a picture that they can send back to their buddies and go, look, this is where Saddam is. And so literally we were having to try to figure out if the idiots driving by are terrorists trying to actually take pictures and plan an escape. And we got intel that that's what they were planning. They were going to drive 3 vehicles, V-bids. One was going to explode before the gate. One would explode into the gate to kind of open up a way for the second one to get to the gate. It explodes, and then the third one would come in and actually get Saddam out. And so we're on pins and needles for that. We got Delta, everybody's there. Snipers are on every roof. Everybody's just, stressed to the max. This is when Saddam was taken. I believe that had to be the second deployment. Okay. It had to be my second. Yep. Okay. And I think that was kind of really was the end of that deployment because they ended up moving him, and we didn't know where they took him, but they eventually did. But we had him there for a couple of weeks, several weeks. I ended up actually getting to see him in person. Once again, Parker, he comes to me, he goes, hey, Ryan, I think I figured out a way that we can get in to see him. All the officers had already been in trouble because everybody wanted to go take a picture with Saddam. And so everybody's like, this is stupid. Nobody's allowed to take pictures with Saddam anymore. But there's guard duty at that actual building. And so Rangers were being in there, but they were picking guys that were higher up, right? Specialists and sergeants and higher. So we weren't ever going to get picked to do that. We were going to be stuck on gate duty. So Parker's like, I've got this. Come with me. We're going to pretend like we're going to be in the rotation for the security internal. They don't know. And I'm like, I don't know if this works, but the worst that can happen is we have to do a lot of push-ups and like we get yelled at. So let's do it. So we literally go over but we had to act cool. So we walk up, he knocks on the gate. Yeah, I'm here to see Corporal so-and-so that was on the end. I keep saying Corporal Sergeant so-and-so that was on the inside. He knocks on the door. Hey, can I see Sergeant so-and-so? He needs us in there. I was like, okay, opens the door. We go in, we go all the way back. Everybody's kind of looking at us, but we're not looking at them. We act like we know where we're going. And he had already got the schematics of where Saddam was actually at from his buddy. And so he goes over, knocks on the door. They open it up, and it's the picture you all saw of Saddam with the crazy hair and the tile behind him. It's that room. That's where he's at. And it has it's kind of this weird sterile room that's just white. It has a concrete bench that he's sitting on, and there's a drain in the floor. And there's fresh urine running all on the floor because at that time, that's when we found out Saddam has very bad bladder problems. So he constantly pees on himself. And so he's sitting there kind of in his own pee, and he just the look on his face is just a permanent disdain for him even needing to be here because we're so below him. And the fact that the Americans are holding him seemed to be his attitude at being captured and being held by the Americans. And so, I got to look at him in the face, and the guy who's sitting in there with Saddam is like, and I was like, okay, so he's in here. All right. And the street is a stroke of genius. I was like, okay, so he's in here. And so we'll just be standing out here. Okay. Hey, thanks, sir. And we shut the door, and then we make a beeline out. Nobody ever asked. Nobody ever found out. They just thought that we were supposed to be there and supposed to do that. And we were going to maybe be in the rotation. But yeah, we got away with that one clean. So from there, I ended up going home, and that was, it was getting close to the end of the year. And when we get home, we're like, hey, who wants to go to Ranger school? And it's winter phase. If you don't know, when you're in Ranger school in winter phase, you're just going to be in hypothermia, in and out of hypothermia the entire time that you're there, and you're always going to be back and forth in the water, and it rains constantly at that time. So you're going to be in freezing rain all the time. I end up getting they asked for volunteers on our team, and I'm like, I'm ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and go. And everybody else wanted to go home and see their family for Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that. And I was like, nah, I'd rather get my Ranger tab. So I end up going down for pre-Ranger, which for people who don't know about Ranger School, again, people who graduate from Ranger School are people who are taking an Army leadership course, not special operations, not the Ranger Regiment. So they get a tab and they call themselves Rangers, which is why you'll always hear everybody saying that they are a Ranger. And some are people who've served in special operations. Some are just people who've taken an Army class called Ranger School. What it really teaches you, or did back when I went through it, because when I went through it was much worse. It was way harder on your body. You didn't get as much sleep, barely any sleep for your patrols, and you were starved as well. And so, as I mentioned before, boot camp, I didn't gain or lose a single pound in 13 weeks in Marine Corps boot camp. In Ranger School, I lost 30 pounds. So I was a skeleton at that time. I had sunken in eyes. I looked really, really bad. And Ranger School, in and of itself, they bring you in day one, they sit you down, and they tell you, this is going to destroy your body. As a matter of fact, you're taking years off of your life if you go straight through this course. Hint, most of you aren't going to make it through this course straight through. Most people get recycled in one of the phases. That just compounds the many issues that you're going to have of your body going through sleep deprivation as well as starvation simultaneously. So we already know what we're signed up for. Doesn't matter. I'm in the Rangers. I have to have my Ranger tab. And then when I get back, I'm going to get a leadership role. I'll be a team leader. So we start the class off and we are miserable. But as luck would have it, one of the other Rangers, you're not allowed to wear rank. You're not allowed to wear anything that shows where you're from. So you're not supposed to know who the real Ranger Regiment guys are, or the rank of the other people. Some are Special Forces captains. We had multiple captains from Special Forces, Green Berets, that were in the class with us, but they're sterile. They're not wearing anything that lets you know that. Their name and U.S. Army, and that's all that everybody's wearing. So we end up doing, just all the unfun stuff that you see, digging through the worm pit. You have to dive into the worm pit, and it's ice cold at that time, and go underneath the barbed wire. You get all cut up. One of the guys who is there, it ends up being Christophe Domey, and Christopher was my Ranger buddy. Once I found out he was a forward observer from 2nd Ranger Battalion, and I'm the forward observer, the only one in the other one in the class from 1st Bat, we immediately hit it off. Anytime that we could do anything small to get out of what we're supposed to be doing and just show any defiance in the little ways, we would do. Anytime you're supposed to say Ranger the whole time, Ranger, and he would just go, oh, rubble. And I would do that too until we were going right past the Ranger instructor, and then we'd be like, oh, Ranger. And we would just do it in the most annoying ways. And then they would make us do push-ups. And we thought it was funny because, again, the rest of these people are people from 70% roughly are coming from West Point. These people haven't been in combat. They haven't been in the Army. They haven't done any of the things that we've done. And he's had multiple combat deployments. I've had two. And all the things I've already seen, So for us, it was funny. And, yeah, we're all freezing, but everybody else is whining. And it makes it just that much more fun for you when you're not the one suffering the most. So going through the course with him initially, obviously it was great. I absolutely loved getting to go through all of that and being one arm's length away from Domey. I ended up passing my patrol very easily. As a matter of fact, my very first patrol, and you should be one and done, but then somebody had failed in theirs, so they maybe make other people come and do another one. We did the second patrol and it went terrible, and it was freezing rain and all of our hands stopped working, and literally, so that one was a big fail. So we get back and I'm fine because I already know I got a pass on my very first patrol. And Sure enough, they start calling off the names of people that are recycled. I'm down at the latrine with Domey, and they call off, and somebody comes running down. Ryan, they called your name, and I'm like, okay, they called my name, and they're like, no, I'm serious. I'm like, okay. So me and Domey, we run back up, and sure enough, they're like, yeah, get your ruck, get all your stuff, and go sit over there. And they don't tell you anything. They just say, did we call your name? Your name's Ryan. Let's sit over there. So they pull you off, and you're sitting over there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting around. A couple people that failed their patrols that I know, obviously. And now I start seeing Rangers showing up. And here's this guy, and here's this guy, and I'm like, no. Okay, so this is something else. So we're not recycled. This is something else. I don't know why they're pulling us apart, but this isn't recycled because none of these guys failed. And then sure enough, they're like, yeah, all right, you guys are getting recycled. You guys failed your patrols, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, there's no recourse. There's nothing you can really do on your end. Just you're recycled. And one of the guys who was in our platoon, he quits. And he was an officer. He was a JROT or ROTC. And so he didn't come through West Point, but he was a really, really smart, very stout dude, very solid. But that broke him. That moment when he found out he was recycled, that broke him, and nothing we could say to him pulled him back from that ledge. He quit. He went in and voluntarily quit, which was really kind of blew my mind. And I'm just like, man, I'm here until this is done. Or I can't really get into, because there's a lot of physical things that I had to go through. We did as an entire class in pre-Ranger. All of us had formed nearly Achilles tendonitis on all of our ankles and our Achilles, because we had to wear leather army boots. We'd never had to wear those. We wear jungle boots. We wear different things in the regiment. Here we have to wear. It's required. Everybody has to wear solid leather boots. In the cold, it doesn't stretch, and your ankle and Achilles do stretch, so it ends up really jacking up your ankles. And so we were all physically having a lot of issues with all of our ankles. We were told we could just actually recycle at pre-Ranger and not have to do anything, just heal and then go into the next class. But I didn't want to delay anything. So I was going through physically a lot with my ankles, and so were a bunch of the other guys. And our ankles were so swollen, we couldn't even get our boots on once we had finished our patrols. And now I'm walking around in tennis shoes that I can't even lace up. But it doesn't matter. I'm still going to roll on. Domey and one other Ranger I know of ends up going on. They were the only two that ended up not being recycled. The Navy SEAL, all of the Special Forces captains got recycled. All of us Rangers got recycled. The one, he was Polish. He was 06 in the Polish military. He got recycled. I'm like, this makes zero sense, but it is what it is. And so we're chilling, and now we're waiting for the next class to come in, and they have to do the first 2 weeks, and then we would pick up with them because we've already done the PT test, the land nav. We've already passed all that, climbed through the worm pit. We've already done all that. You don't have to redo that. You just have to go back out and do the patrols and Derby phase. So we go and do that, and what they were doing was they essentially created kind of like a super class is what we call it. Because now it's very heavy with the people who've actually been in combat and have real world experience roll over into this class that also has Rangers and Special Forces and all these other guys who have experience. Now, instead of a 70-30 class or 80-20 class, now it's more like it's closer to a 40, or it's closer to like a 50-50 or, a 40-60. So way easier for that class to go straight through. And that's what we did. First phase, second phase, third phase, we went straight through. But at the end of Ranger school for me, I ended up graduating, and I get to see my family, and it's great. But Domey had already graduated, and so he's at second bat, the other side of the country. And I never did get to reconnect with him. And it wasn't until years later that we actually went and did a training mission where we ended up jumping into Fort Sill Oklahoma, first time Rangers had ever done that. And it was just for show. And so we could kind of run around and do PT there and show everybody how we do things in the Ranger Regiment. And it was a good big PR thing. And little did I know that years later, when I would come back and visit there, I would now be at the same place where I took Fort Observer training. And here we are showing off as the Rangers at Fort Observer School. And now they've renamed the school, the schoolhouse building, after Christoph, after Domey, because he actually got killed in Afghanistan. He was the Ranger with the most combat deployments, I believe 14 combat deployments under his belt. So it was very hard for me because I always planned on seeing him after. I think I always wanted to get out of the military and go federal law enforcement, and then get to see him again, because I would come back as this somebody from the fill in the blank FBI bomb dog handler guy that we worked with, all these other guys that we worked with that were making 5 times what we were making, and they got to decide where they were going, and they weren't on the front lines. They were riding along with us, and then they kind of hung back. And so I think that was where, with Domey, I always hoped that I would get to see him again. And it's bittersweet, that he's definitely remembered. And he always will be, because he was just such a great guy. And every person that ever met Christoph absolutely loved him. So I'm super lucky to have been one arm's length away from him for, an entire cycle. Starve together, freeze together. But now I get out, and now what am I going to do with my life? Well, I want to get my degree. I talked to the bomb dog handler when I was working with him in Afghanistan from the FBI, and he said, man, with your background, like this isn't an opportunity anybody's ever had before. You're coming straight off. You were there for the first invasion of Iraq, 3 years. You're getting out. You're going to be the first guys to come in, apply to the FBI with combat experience in special operations. He's like, you're going to fly right through. It will be easy. Get your degree, though, because you can't even apply until you have your degree. So I got out, and that was my whole plan. I ended up trying to get a job, and nobody would hire me. Took me 6 months to find a job, because nobody wants to hire a combat veteran Army Ranger with 4 combat deployments. With 4 combat deployments. Like, again, these Oklahoma. Who wants to have a combat veteran from special operations as the guy you need to go tell him to fix his time reports or fix his time card, to fix some report? I don't know. I wasn't thinking of it back then. I was just super frustrated because nobody would hire me. And it wasn't until I went to a job interview and I was like, hey, I just served in the Army. And they're like, well, what'd you do? I was like, I talked on radios. And they go, hired. So I got hired. And then once I got into the company, I was like, yeah, actually I have special operations. They promoted me almost immediately, like nothing. And they loved it. Once you got past the HR, essentially the HR barrier, then everybody loved having somebody with, that was driven and motivated and wanted to do good and be a part of a team. So I did that while I was going through my college, and I was cruising through college. It was okay. I did pre-med because I was stupid, and I thought, I want to do the hardest thing to challenge myself again. It doesn't matter what degree you have to go into federal law enforcement, so why not go after the hardest one? So zoology, anatomy, physiology, microbiology, anything with ology I took. And I didn't do great, but I passed all of them. So I was like, awesome. Now I just need to, because I always thought, well, my fallback is I could go into the nursing program and be a PA. And then I got to the end and found out if you don't have a 4.0, no, they will never even see your application in Oklahoma, because there's so few schools that actually have a nursing to medical program. That's the next step. After you get your associates, you go through the nursing program, and then from there you can branch off and go where you want to go. So now I'm just like, well, what do I want to do? And it was at that time this guy that I was working with said, hey, I'm taking a PT test for the local police department. you want to come with me? And I was like, I can't do that while I'm going to college full time. He's like, sure you can, just work at night. And I thought, you're a genius. Why had I not thought of that? Of course, being a police officer and making more money and getting experience would be way better when I applied to the FBI. And at that time, I met a friend who was actually in federal law enforcement on the Customs Border Protection, and he actually went around and introduced me to the head of the ATF, the Secret Service, and Customs Border Protection there, and all phenomenal people. And the ATF guys were actually former Ranger bad guys. So that was awesome. But ultimately, I was like, I really think the FBI is where I want to go. So that's where I kept working toward that and became a police officer. And then again, the law enforcement route that I went, I just took the PT test. I set a new record for the run time. Not like that's a huge accomplishment coming from, small town Oklahoma. But it set me up for what I thought would be success. And then once again, it's that, and I think this is definitely something that most people find hard to believe that you can do this is, going through everything I just described to you while never drinking a drop of alcohol, while not speaking, like never saying curse words. So I think that part, I had already seen, right, being ostracized when I deployed. Actually, my first deployment, when I came back from my first deployment, the jump, Brandon Miller dies. I go to get in my car, and I get in my car. We have locked up in a little compound. It's covered in razor wire. Nobody can get in it, and you lock your keys up inside so that way your vehicle's safe while you're gone on deployment. When I get back, I start it and I drive it down the road and the engine blows up because some helpful rangers had came out and emptied all the oil out of my car while I was gone. So blew my engine up. So now I don't have a car. So there's people that don't like you. They find ways to let you know that. I don't know who that was. I'm sure they got a good laugh out of me having to go buy another car with my deployment money. But this was where, once again, I'm going to be a police officer. Surely guys will want a special operations guy on their team, somebody who's just set a new record for your PT time. And then immediately, dudes absolutely hate my guts when I walk in because that's my face, because it's whatever. And then they find out, I don't drink, I'm not one of the guys. And so I've lived my whole life being an outsider until they need me. And then, lo and behold, once they need you, then you're one of the guys again. When they need, somebody to drive, to be the designated driver. Oh, Ryan, hey, buddy, come over here. So the whole time through the regiment, I was always the designated driver, always, And the other part of that, though, I think that nobody ever takes into consideration for guys who've gotten away from alcohol. Like, you have to sit and think of everything. Like, the big part of drinking, especially when you're young and getting back from combat deployments, like, yeah, let's go get wild and let's forget all this stuff for a little while. You packed all this in. You've smelled burnt bodies. You've been around death. You've, volunteered for suicide missions. The one thing I think makes my story totally different is I guess the best way to say it is I've been in my head every second of every moment. So I think that's harder for people. It's harder than people would think. If you're, especially if you're thinking of things like after, the Jessica Lynch and the digging up bodies, I think that it's hard to really kind of share that with people because it's like, yeah, I don't have a release. I don't have a turn off to this. I'm in my head. I'm remembering things. I'm good at coping and, cramming things down and not thinking about it a lot. But it eventually comes back, you have to think about these things, especially the older you get. And now as a new father and trying to think of, the lessons that I want to teach my son. I think that the way that I went was the right thing. And I know it because I've been able to help guys who are, years later are trying to get off alcohol. They're trying to get away from pain pills. They're trying to get away from that dependency they have on an exterior thing that helps them manage with the stress and the things that they've been through. And it's me, the guys call up, and I'm always going to be here for that, and so there's several buddies that contact me all the time, and I'm that guy for them, and whatever they need, it's not just we're all fighting the 22 a day, right, and veteran suicide, but it's also just being a person that's always there for people whenever they need you, who can relate to what you've been through. And my last deployment, a guy got severely injured, and he ended up, now he's paraplegic. He ended up getting in a drunk driving accident, and God allowed him to live because he was upside down in a truck in a ditch, and the water was just almost at his mouth, so he would have died. It took a while for people to find him off the side of the road, but he's alive today. And it's guys like that where the one thing they remembered and called me out of the blue. They're like, Ryan was the guy that was always going to church when we were deployed. When we're back home, that's what I was doing. And what I'm going to share with my son, and like I say, anybody that listens to my stories, I really think that so much good comes from standing up for who you are, whether or not that's going to be popular or, if it gets you not nearly as many likes online or whatever it is. There's going to be people that are going to be critical of you throughout life. And yes, you may think this is going to make life harder for you, but I would just say to those kids, to those people that are thinking that, like, it's worth it. It's worth it to be there for other people. I had, I've had it happen where they won't do it publicly. They won't do it in front of other people. They'll come to you on the side and be like, hey man, this dude's been doing nothing but making fun of me and calling me names and telling me I'm an idiot for the whole time I've been working with him. And now all of a sudden he's calling me on the side being like, hey man, the doctor says I'm going to die if I don't change my diet. So I know that you were more into eating healthy and like working out all the time. What do you think? That's that moment where you could be vindictive. You could let somebody know how you made them feel, but at the end of the day, you're who you are, and you got to stay to that, and you've got to be a rock for people. And I would just say that that's the one thing that I've learned from going through all the things I've been through, and specifically not relying on chemicals or any other thing to take the edge off. I've had to sit and think through it and process. And, that's what I'm trying to do now. The work that I do now is to try to think through these things, to relate with other people that are going through something hard. And we have a whole generation in this country of young men that are struggling. And I think that's where, this veteran suicide, I don't think that's going to go away. And I don't think suicide as a whole is going to go away in our country until people start standing up for what's right and stop going along with what everybody else is doing, and stop worrying about what the fad is. And people aren't getting enough likes online and they're committing suicide. The kids are literally, getting bullied online and are getting, are choosing to commit suicide in middle school. Like, there's literally elementary school students that have been committing suicide in our country. And you're just sitting back as It's gonna be a minute.
No problem.
I don't even know if I'll be able to get that out. Being a new father. I think being a father has really given me an opportunity to kind of reflect on the decisions I made and the lessons that I want to distill down and teach him. And I think that's one of the most important things that I'm ever going to teach my son is, doing the right thing is always the right thing. And I think God is going to, if you really believe in God and that he's going to take care of you, then he is. And, again, I've mentioned several people that I serve with that were phenomenal dudes. And, several of them I know for a fact, were very devout Christians and believed in God and, prayed just like I do for their safety. I think that this life can be long, it can be short. But God has a reason for everything that's going to happen. And I don't know why he's kept me alive a lot of, through a lot of it. But, I know now that my son, this is, I can't even get it out. But I know my son is the reason that I'm here. I'm never going to put a burden on him to make him think he's going to need to be a ranger. I just want him to be whatever he's going to be. And I wish more parents were like that. And my wife, just like me, has this, feeling like this never-ending need to accomplish, to do great things. And I think it comes from both of our childhoods. My wife is a Marine combat veteran as well. And I think that's something we want to make sure that our kids going forward don't think they need to follow in footsteps or do some amazing thing. So that's the message I really want to impart and to give people the hope that you can still have your morals. You could actually still be a Christian. You can still go to church and you can do anything that anybody else is, and there's no thing that you can't still do while being true to yourself and true to God, but it will come at a cost. People are going to dislike you and they're going to show that in one way or the other. And then lo and behold, like I say, and then one day they're going to be older and they're going to wise up and maybe they'll feel bad about that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I don't need people to feel guilty for how they've, treated me or whatever. But, like I said, my podcast, what I'm doing now, I wrote a book. I actually wrote a book about my 3 years in the regiment where I can actually get into these stories and I have a lot more. But all that is going to be on my podcast, and I'm doing the editing on my book now. And like I say, that's my message though. My message is that I want to really kind of be there for and help mentor the young men that are struggling in this nation, in this country. Obviously the boys and the girls, but I'm a guy, and everything I do, as I've been told many times in my life, is very aggressive and very masculine. So that's what I'm focused on, is just sharing, what my experiences are. And most likely it's going to be boys and young men that are going to want to be interested in doing things I do. And yeah, that's really what I want to share with people. And, my story is, as I told you before, I'm not some hero that saved the day one day, but man, if you take chances and you do put yourself out there, you can live an extraordinary life. And I don't recommend anybody follow my footsteps of all the different things I've done, but man, as you can tell, I have a million stories, and we've only been talking about a sliver of it for this whole podcast, so.
What's the name of your podcast?
So Old Ranger, New Dad, and my son is an IVF baby, and we have another one actually on the way, another little boy, and you get to pick doing an IVF now. You get to do the genetics and know, and so I'm doing everything I can so I can stay at home with Archer, just working, doing my podcast, and be able to be there for him every day of his life. So.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been a pleasure to sit with you, Seth.
It's been a pleasure, brother. I appreciate you.
Thanks, man.